When Americans think of World War II cinema, they usually picture massive battles, heroic speeches, and sweeping victories framed through Hollywood spectacle. But Britain told the war differently. British filmmakers focused on endurance, exhaustion, moral compromise, and quiet terror rather than triumph. What makes them powerful is what they leave unsaid. Here are 10 great British World War II films most Americans ignore. Films shaped by lived memory, restraint, and brutal honesty. Number 10, Went the Day Well, 1942. Went the Day Well is one of the most unsettling invasion films ever produced, and it achieves its power without spectacle. Released during the war itself, this film imagines a nightmare scenario where German paratroopers disguise themselves as British soldiers and quietly infiltrate a peaceful English village. There are no warning signs, no dramatic landings, just polite smiles, uniforms, and accents that almost pass. The terror comes from recognition that safety is an illusion. The film slowly strips away the idea that civilian life is separate from war. Ordinary villagers become reluctant fighters, not out of patriotism, but necessity. Violence arrives suddenly and without heroics. Deaths are abrupt and often cruel. The film refuses to glorify resistance. Instead, it shows the cost of hesitation and misplaced trust. The message is stark: complacency kills. What makes Went the Day Well extraordinary is its tone. There is no swelling music, no speeches. The camera observes rather than celebrates. This was propaganda, but of a uniquely British kind. It warns rather than reassures. It suggests invasion would not be cinematic. It would be chaotic, intimate, and horrifying. That honesty makes it feel modern, even now. American audiences rarely encounter this film, but it remains one of the most chilling wartime statements ever made. Number 9, The Way Ahead, 1944. The Way Ahead dismantles the myth of the natural-born soldier. Instead, it follows a group of ordinary civilians drafted into the British Army with no illusion about heroism or readiness. These men do not want glory. They want to survive. The film begins with frustration, confusion, and resentment as training exposes their weaknesses rather than their strength. David Niven delivers one of the most grounded performances of his career, portraying an officer who understands that leadership is not about authority, but patience. The men bicker, complain, and fail repeatedly. Progress is slow and often humiliating. This is not a story of instant transformation. It is a story of reluctant adaptation. When combat finally arrives, it is brief, terrifying, and unresolved. There is no sense of victory, only endurance. The film ends not with triumph, but continuation. These men are soldiers now, whether they like it or not. The Way Ahead resonated deeply with British audiences because it reflected reality. Most soldiers were not heroes. They were civilians forced forward by history. American war films often emphasize destiny and individual excellence. This film emphasizes obligation and collective suffering. That difference is precisely why it remains overlooked, yet essential. Number 8, The Cruel Sea, 1953. The Cruel Sea is widely regarded in Britain as one of the most truthful naval war films ever made, yet it remains largely unknown to American audiences. It follows Royal Navy officers tasked with protecting Atlantic convoys from German submarines. There are no climactic victories here, only long stretches of tension broken by sudden, irreversible loss. The film focuses heavily on psychological damage. Officers are forced to make impossible decisions, knowing every choice will cost lives. One of the most devastating moments involves a decision that saves a ship, but condemns men already in the water. The camera does not flinch from the aftermath. Guilt becomes a permanent companion. Unlike American naval films that celebrate strategy and command, The Cruel Sea is about erosion. Sleep deprivation, moral injury, and constant fear slowly hollow out the characters. Promotion is not reward, it is burden. Survival feels accidental. The sea itself is portrayed as indifferent and merciless. It is not an arena for heroism, but a grinding force that consumes men without ceremony. By the end, there is no catharsis, only exhaustion. That restraint is why the film endures. and why it remains one of the most honest portraits of wartime leadership ever filmed. Number 7. Ice Cold in Alex, 1958. Ice Cold in Alex is not a combat film in the traditional sense. There are no sweeping offensives or heroic charges. Instead, the film is about survival under relentless pressure in the North African desert. The story follows a small group attempting to evacuate a wounded soldier in an ambulance while German forces close in from every direction. The enemy is rarely seen. Heat thirst and exhaustion do most of the damage. What makes the film remarkable is its focus on physical and psychological depletion. Every mile feels earned. The desert is filmed as a hostile living presence that drains strength and patience. Characters snap at each other. Morale collapses. Courage is reduced to putting one foot in front of the other. There is no romance and endurance here, only necessity. The tension comes from small moments rather than action set pieces. A stalled engine, a missing canteen, a suspicious stranger. The film constantly asks how much trust is possible when survival is at stake. That question becomes literal when the group is forced to rely on a man who may be working for the enemy. The famous final scene involving a cold beer is often remembered as triumphant. In context, it feels earned rather than celebratory. It represents survival, not victory. Ice Cold in Alex understands that for many soldiers, the war was not about defeating the enemy, but outlasting the environment and their own breaking point. American audiences often overlook this film because it lacks spectacle, but veterans frequently praise it for capturing the fatigue and monotony that defined desert warfare more accurately than most battle-driven epics ever could. Number 6. The Dam Busters, 1955. The Dam Busters is often reduced to its technical achievement and famous score, but that reputation undersells its emotional restraint. At its core, this is a procedural film about preparation obsession and moral consequence. The story follows the development of a radical new bombing technique designed to destroy German dams. What matters is not heroism, but precision. Much of the film is devoted to experimentation failure and repetition. Engineers argue over measurements. Pilots rehearse endlessly. Mistakes are studied rather than dramatized. This focus on process reflects a distinctly British wartime mentality. Victory is treated as a byproduct of discipline rather than bravery. When the mission finally occurs, it is swift, brutal, and costly. Aircraft are lost without ceremony. Crews disappear into darkness. The film refuses to linger on individual deaths. Instead, it shows the toll on those who planned the mission and survived it. Success brings relief rather than joy. What makes the Dam Busters uncomfortable is its refusal to indulge in moral clarity. Civilian casualties are acknowledged quietly. The destruction is framed as necessary, but not glorious. Characters understand the cost and carry it forward. American war films often emphasize payoff. This film emphasizes aftermath. That is why it remains misunderstood outside Britain. It is not a celebration of ingenuity. It is a study in responsibility and the heavy silence that follows success. Number 5. Ill Met by Moonlight, 1957. Ill Met by Moonlight tells one of the strangest true stories of the war. A British intelligence operation kidnaps a German general from occupied Crete and attempts to smuggle him across the island under constant threat of discovery. The premise sounds like adventure fiction, but the film treats it with restraint and tension. There is very little gunfire. Instead, the danger comes from silence, footsteps on gravel, a light in the distance, a wrong word spoken in the dark. The film emphasizes patience and trust rather than daring. Success depends on local resistance fighters risking everything to protect strangers. What sets the film apart is its depiction of respect between enemies. The captured general is not demonized. He is treated as a professional soldier, caught in a larger machine. Conversations between captor and captive reveal shared codes of honor, even as the stakes remain deadly. The landscape becomes a character in its own right. Mountains and villages provide both shelter and threat. Every delay increases the chance of betrayal. The film builds tension through waiting rather than action. Ill Met by Moonlight reflects a British understanding of war as ambiguity rather than absolutes. Intelligence work is shown as morally complex and emotionally isolating. There is no triumph at the end, only relief and exhaustion. American audiences often miss this film because it lacks spectacle, but its quiet intensity and moral nuance make it one of the most authentic espionage films ever produced. Number 4. The Hill, 1965. The Hill is a war film without a battlefield. Set almost entirely inside a British military prison in the North African desert, it explores how power corrodes when rules replace humanity. The enemy is not the Germans. It is the system itself. The story follows a group of soldiers subjected to brutal disciplinary punishment under the authority of a sadistic sergeant major. The hill of the title is a mound of sand. Prisoners are forced to repeatedly climb under the sun. It becomes a symbol of pointless suffering inflicted in the name of order. The punishment serves no tactical purpose. It exists only to break spirits. Sean Connery delivers a raw, restrained performance that strips away any remaining trace of cinematic glamour. What makes The Hill extraordinary is its moral clarity. The film refuses to justify cruelty as necessary discipline. Officers debate regulations while men collapse from exhaustion. Authority hides behind procedure. Responsibility dissolves into paperwork. The war becomes an excuse for abuse rather than its cause. There is no rousing rebellion. Resistance is subtle and costly. The film builds towards a confrontation that feels inevitable rather than triumphant. Justice arrives not through violence, but exposure. Even then, it feels incomplete. American audiences often overlook The Hill because it offers no combat and no victory, but it captures a truth many veterans recognize. War does not only destroy through bullets, it destroys through institutions that forget why they exist. The Hill remains one of the most uncompromising examinations of military power ever put on screen. Number 3. The Colditz Story, 1955. The Colditz Story focuses on Allied prisoners held in Colditz Castle, a German prison designed for repeat escapees. Rather than presenting a single hero, the film emphasizes collective ingenuity. Escape is treated not as a fantasy, but as a long, exhausting process built on patience, cooperation, and constant failure. Most escape attempts do not succeed. Plans collapse. Tunnels are discovered. Punishments increase. The film treats these setbacks as expected rather than dramatic twists. Persistence becomes the real achievement. What distinguishes the film is its respect for both sides. German guards are portrayed as professionals enforcing rules rather than caricatured villains. This balance heightens tension. The threat is real precisely because it is rational. The Colditz Story avoids sentimentality. Friendship is forged through shared purpose rather than speeches. Hope exists, but it is fragile. Victory is measured in inches and minutes rather than liberation. American prison escape films often emphasize individual brilliance. This film emphasizes teamwork and endurance. Escape is not about glory. It is about refusing to accept captivity as final. That restrained approach is why the film resonates deeply with veterans and historians while remaining underseen in the United States. It treats imprisonment as a psychological war fought with patience rather than bravado. Number 2. Battle of Britain, 1969. Battle of Britain does not present air combat as thrilling spectacle. It presents it as attrition. The film unfolds like a campaign report brought to life, showing how the survival of a nation depended on logistics discipline and exhausted men climbing back into cockpits day after day. There is no singular hero because there was no singular hero in reality. The battle was won by accumulation, not moments. What immediately sets the film apart is its physical authenticity. Real aircraft fill the sky, not models or effects. Dogfights are filmed at distance and altitude, emphasizing confusion rather than clarity. Pilots often never see who shoots them down. Death arrives suddenly, without ceremony. This is air warfare stripped of romance. The film spends significant time on command decisions and miscalculations. Strategy is debated, adjusted, and often guessed at. Information is incomplete. Radar reports conflict. Every decision is made under pressure, with lives hanging in the balance. This perspective gives the film its quiet tension. Victory feels provisional and fragile. German pilots are portrayed with professionalism and seriousness. They are not monsters or fools. They are men following orders in a campaign shaped by politics and timing, rather than ideology alone. This balance deepens the tragedy rather than softening it. American audiences often expect emotional release from war films. Battle of Britain offers none. The ending is subdued, almost anticlimactic. The enemy withdraws. The cost remains. Exhaustion replaces relief. That refusal to dramatize success is exactly why pilots and historians continue to praise the film as one of the most truthful depictions of aerial warfare ever produced. Number 1. A Bridge Too Far, 1977. A Bridge Too Far is not a story about bravery overcoming odds. It is a story about optimism colliding with reality. The film examines Operation Market Garden through a deliberately fragmented structure that mirrors the chaos of the plan itself. Characters are introduced quickly, often without resolution, because war does not offer neat conclusions. The central theme is overconfidence. Planners believe speed will compensate for risk. Intelligence warnings are dismissed. Timelines are tightened beyond reason. The film shows how confidence at the top becomes catastrophe at the front. Soldiers execute orders flawlessly, only to discover the orders were flawed from the start. Combat scenes are staged without triumph. Advances stall. Bridges are reached too late. Reinforcements fail to arrive. Heroism becomes irrelevant when coordination collapses. The film repeatedly emphasizes men fighting bravely for objectives that no longer matter. What distinguishes the film from typical war epics is its emotional restraint. There is no final speech. No redemptive victory. Loss is cumulative and uncorrected. Survivors retreat, carrying the knowledge that their sacrifice changed nothing. Despite its international cast, the film's worldview is distinctly British. It treats failure as something to be examined rather than excused. The title itself is an admission. The plan asked too much and delivered too little. A Bridge Too Far endures because it refuses myth-making. It reminds audiences that courage does not guarantee success, and that the most devastating defeats are often born from confidence rather than fear. These British World War II films do not chase applause or spectacle. They confront fatigue, fear, moral compromise, and the quiet damage left behind when battles end. Their power comes from restraint and honesty rather than victory. They remind us that war is not a series of heroic moments, but a prolonged test of endurance, judgment, and humanity. If these stories feel unfamiliar, it is because they were never meant to comfort. They were meant to remember.